Good mid-afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Mid-Afternoon Masterclass, one of the marquee events of the University of Melbourne's 10th Annual Science Festival as part of National Science Week. My name is Julia, and I will be your host for today's masterclass and all the masterclasses happening this week, all at 2 p.m. Now, as your host, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded lands on which we are filming, the Wurundjeri people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are this country's first scientists with deep and enduring knowledge of the land, waters and skies. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I welcome all First Nations people joining us today. In making this acknowledgement, we commit to respectful and responsible conduct towards all others according to the traditional laws of this land, particularly at times of formal ceremony. Today's event is How to Catch Coconut Cracking Rats with Dr Tyrone Lavery. So Dr Tyrone studies rare and unique mammals in Australia and the Southwest Pacific, as well as searching for new, undescribed species. He seeks to understand how different species are related, where they occur, and how we can best look after them. He's also a big AFL fan, and cats is your team. Mm-hmm. Yep, so rats and cats, that's your thing. Very good. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Now, before we jump in, I do also want to mention that today we are coming to you also live from the Teagues Museum here at the University of Melbourne. This museum was established in 1887, so quite a long time ago. It's Australia's oldest university museum of zoology. It's home to 3,000 specimens, including lots you can actually see behind us, as well as we've got a huge giraffe skull over to the side of us, and even a chimpanzee skeleton that was signed by none other than Dr Jane Goodall, DBE. So there you go. And Tyrone, I believe you're director of the whole museum.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what does that mean? What does the director do?
So we have about 3,000 specimens here in the museum, so that keeps me very busy. One big thing is just maintaining them, making sure they're in good condition. We occasionally bring new things in as well, so it involves cataloguing those and making sure that they're recorded as part of this collection. Yep,
keeping it all maintained for us all to enjoy. Very good. Okay, cool. So today, like we've done for the Monday and Tuesday, so Tyrone will do a presentation for about 20 minutes or so, and then we will hand over to you who have zoomed in today. We'll take your questions, and then we'll finish up about 2:45. There'll also be a few polls, so look out for them. Now, to ask a question, all you need to do is pop it in the chat, and in there we also welcome all your comments, any clapping or cheering emojis, of course, also very important, but of course please be respectful in that chat as well. Now, before we get into it, I do want to make sure that everything's working. I believe it's already gone into the chat already, but we'd love to know from you, our audience, where are you zooming in from? Tell us, write it in the chat, what suburb are you from, what city, what country? We've got lots already. Sydney, Point Cook, India, Wurundjeri country, thank you, Fiji, Indonesia, Melbourne. Lots of people zooming in to check out the presentation. Very good. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to have you here. And without further ado, I will pass on to you. Thanks Tyrone.
Very much, Julia.
No worries.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about some of the work that goes into describing a new species of mammal. There's around 6,500 species of mammal worldwide. And you might be surprised to learn that every year we add new species to that list. More or less about 20 species every year of new mammals. Often that comes through just looking at mammals we know exist already really closely. And when we look at things like DNA, we recognise that what we thought was one species is actually multiple things, and then we have to go in and describe those new species and give them new names. Less common way is actually going out into the environment and finding new things that we didn't really know existed there at all, and then giving those new species a new name. I'm going to step you through an example of work like that today. And I want to give you some examples of the types of decisions we have to make and some of the approaches we need to think about when we're out there looking for evidence of new species, because it can take a lot of detective work. And so I want to give you a taste of that, of what decisions you might need to make. So how do I make it this?
Oh, no, there we go. Yep.
Yeah, our story takes us to Solomon Islands. It's an archipelago of around 1,000 islands to the northeast of Australia. And just off the end of New Guinea, which is the world's largest tropical island, it's really like the Galapagos of the Southwest Pacific. Sorry, there we go. And yeah, it's one of the most biodiverse groups of islands on the planet. Its proximity to New Guinea means that lots of mammals have been able to colonise Solomon Islands, but it's also groups of islands that are separated by oceanic barriers, and so it's a case where lots of individual islands have their own species of mammal because they can't cross across those oceanic barriers. And so there's lots of things that we call endemic. They're not found in anywhere else on the globe. On my first visit to Solomon Islands, I was lucky enough to link up with a really special community at Zyra on the southern coast of Vangunu Island in Solomon Islands. And Zyra is a really special community in that they see the real value of their forests, and they want to keep those forests intact because they recognise that healthy forests are important for their own health and well-being, and they're against more destructive forms of land use like logging and mining. On that first trip, we hiked into the forest with a big group of people from Zyra village, and we stayed there for a couple of weeks to survey the mammals that were there on the interior of their forests. And we went with some elder men in that group who were really knowledgeable, had a fantastic knowledge of all the animals that lived in the bush there. And while we were camped together in the forest, at one stage I pulled out my copy of Mammals of the Southwest Pacific, and we started going through the pages and looking at all the different animals in there. And when we got to the page, or a few of the pages about rats that lived in Solomon Islands, these men began to tell me about their own species of giant rat that they have that lived there called Vicar. And I looked at a map of all the species that were known in Solomons, and there was nothing known from Vangunu, so I was quite confident that if this Vicar did exist, that it would be a new species, a new mammal, new to science. And this photo is pretty much the exact moment that I became really determined that I had to get out there and find this animal, to help prove to the world that Vicar existed.
Cool.
So to summarise the traditional knowledge that was there was this rat called Vicar. I was told that it lived in trees, which we call arboreal. It preferred one species of tree called a Dilenia, and that was because Dilenia are really good at forming hollows, and the knowledge was that Vicar liked to live inside hollows and also amongst epiphytic ferns and orchids and other plants that grow on these trees. And interestingly, they also told me that it was big enough to crack open coconuts, that it could chew on coconuts and eat what was inside them, which I found pretty incredible. Armed with that indigenous knowledge, we set out to try and find evidence of Vicar. And I was working in these big tracts of beautiful, intact forest, and it was an incredible experience, but it was also really challenging. And part of the reason for that was that if you're looking for an animal that lives on the ground, you look left and right, but if we're thinking about an arboreal species, we also have to think about up and down. We're working in 3 dimensions, and that greatly increases the area that we need to search, and in complex forests like rainforests, it can be a really difficult task. The other problem was that these tropical islands have high diversity. There's big numbers of species that live there, but often individual species are quite rare themselves. So what we were looking for was probably pretty rare on the ground. There wasn't many of them. There are some common tools of the trade that we use to survey mammals, and I'll demonstrate a few of those to you now. And I think I'd like you to put yourself in my shoes and think about which one you might choose if you were going to go out and try and get evidence of Vicar with keeping in mind what I've told you already so far. And we don't necessarily have to catch Vicar, I just want you to think about what's the best way to gather some evidence of this species. The first method we've got is spotlighting. So we use a nice, powerful head torch like this one. We wear it down nice and close to our eyes so that we can get the eye shine from the animals, and we just spend hours out there in the forest at night, literally searching up and down trees in the canopy, trying to spot the rodents. The second method is a type of Australian trap. It's called an Elliott trap. It's a small little aluminium box. We put some bait in there, and it's got a little treadle, and when the animal walks inside, it hits that treadle and the door closes and it's captured in there. We usually put those out in the forest for about a week at a time, and because animals are trapped inside, we have to be out there every morning checking them quite early to make sure that they're not stuck in there for too long. The third method is a cage trap, so that works in a similar way. The Elliott's best for targeting smaller animals like antechinus and small rats and mice and those types of things. Cage traps are better for targeting larger animals, and some species don't like going into Elliott traps because it's a closed box. For some species, you're better trapping them in this because it's not a closed space that they're having to enter. But it works the same way. We put some bait in there, and we have to come back every morning and check and make sure that check whether there's animals trapped inside. The next method is a camera trap, and that's becoming more and more popular over time. It's something that we can leave out in the forest for months and months at a time. I've had them out there for 12 months, and I go back and they're still taking photos. They have a sensor here that detects the heat and movement, the body heat of animals, and when it detects those animals, it'll just take a series of photographs. And really popular method that we can cover a lot of area for a limited amount of effort. The last method is really just that detective work that I mentioned, just going out there and looking for signs of the animals, things that they're eating, and any other signs at all that we can detect. So I'd be interested to hear what you think. What's the best method to get out there and find evidence of Vicar? We've got a poll.
Oh, do we? Is it going to come up? Okay, the poll should be coming up pretty soon about what you think. Okay, great, here it is. So we've got the poll. Which method would you choose? Spotlighting, so the Elliott traps, that was that one. Cage traps, the bigger one. Camera traps, and look for signs. I'm disappointed to see that there's no all of the above, because I feel like that might have been the one. No, okay. All right, maybe I should spit too. Okay, I'm gonna go this one. Let's see. So don't forget to submit, and they'll come up pretty soon. Let's see what everyone thinks. Da-da-da-da. Oh, coming up very soon. Lots of different options. All right. All right, the results should come up pretty soon. Okay, sweet. All right, awesome. Okay. Looks like camera traps was the favourite, if everyone was in your shoes. 59%, very good. So 26% also thought the cage traps. Yep, very good. Elliott traps, 9%. Looking for signs, 4%. Spotlighting, only 2%. Although I have a feeling that torch would be useful still.
Still useful, yep.
Okay, well, let us know. What's the answer?
Well, after that first trip, we went back into the forest at Zyra there several times over the course of 5 years. And we went in there and we camped for weeks at a time. We slept in tents like this because we were travelling light. Everywhere we had to go, we had to hike and carry our equipment in. Cool. And we spent weeks in the bush at a time. And to be honest, we tried all of those methods. Oh. The answer is all of the above. We tried everything. We're out there at night spotlighting for hours at a time. On one occasion, we thought we saw a couple of rodents running along the branch of a tree, but we didn't get a really good look at them. So it wasn't the best method. A lot of effort went in for little result. We were up there just physically searching trees for these animals, especially things like this big strangler fig, because they have lots of holes and nooks and crannies where animals can hide in them, and we would just climb up there and search those holes to see if anything was in there. We found lots of cuscus, a type of possum, but no no rodents, no vicar, and again, a really energy-intensive method. We climbed up and we put Elliott and cage traps, both of those trapping methods, up into the trees. This is us doing it on southern Bougainville, but we did the same thing at Zyra. What we caught in those traps were ratus, so Pacific rat and black rat, which are both introduced species that have, this Pacific rat has been in Solomons for around 2,000 years. It was introduced by people, not what we were after, unfortunately. We set camera traps. This is us about to set one again up in the trees in the canopy of the forest. You can see the camera trap on the bottom left of the photo there, and that cage is something that we just knocked together in the village. We filled it with bait and things that we thought might attract vicar to the front of the camera trap so that we could get some photos of the animal. Again, all that we got on those camera traps were black rat, Ratus ratus, which is one of the most widespread introduced species on the planet and something that we could find here outside of the University of Melbourne. We didn't need to go all the way to Solomons to find black rats, and so we were, to be honest, starting to get a little bit worried and that we wouldn't find this animal. And I never doubted the traditional knowledge of vicar because it was so solid that people knew so much about the animal. But I did begin to worry that perhaps vicar might have already become extinct and the traditional knowledge that belonged to vicar may have started to transfer to these more recently introduced rodents. All that we had to go on was that bit of detective work that I mentioned earlier. So we found these nuts on the forest floor, a local nut called a gnarly nut, and they had marks from where rodents had been chewing on them. And the guys at Zyra were adamant that this was vicar, that it wasn't the introduced rats that could chew the nuts like this. In addition to that, I was hiking through the forest one day, and don't ask me how, but I managed to spot a scat on the forest floor, a rodent poo. Yeah. And I collected that and brought it back to Australia and sent it to an expert, and they told me that it contained parts of these gnarly nuts and also some animal fur, but they weren't able to identify that animal. And so we had some close signs, but really not too much to go on after 5 years of searching. We were starting to get a bit worried that we might never find this animal. In 2015, commercial logging started encroaching on Zyra's protected area, and one of my colleagues, Hakuna Judge, who I was working with really closely, just so happened to visit one of those logging areas, and on that day, the company felled a big tree, and right at that time, he just happened to be there. It contained one of these vicars that emerged from the fallen tree. And it was a bittersweet moment because it was in a logging area that was really sad, but also we had this evidence that we'd been searching for so long that vicar was out there and it really existed. Immediately, we could tell it was a new species because it was unlike anything else known from the Solomons. The combination of really reddish brown fur, really tiny ears that barely sticked above that hair. It had really big wide feet, specialised for walking through the canopy and along branches, and really tiny scales on its tail that was unlike any other rodents from Solomons or New Guinea or Australia. And it was a really incredible feeling for us all to know that we hadn't given up, that we'd finally been rewarded for so much hard work that we'd put in hiking the mountains and trying all those trapping efforts. And a lot of work went into describing it, and we published this as a new species. We had to give it a scientific name. We worked out that it belonged to a genus of rats that live in Solomons, New Guinea and Australia called Urames. And we had to put a species name on it, which we chose as vicar. We chose to use the same existing name that it had for thousands of years. We didn't see much point in trying to come up with a new name for the animal. So that's a new species, Urames vicar, and it was a really popular story. Prominent biologist Tim Flannery described it as one of the most astonishing discoveries of the new millennium.
Pretty good. And
really, really popular story, I think because of that backstory of how much effort we put in working together to document this animal. Next step was to assess vicar using the IUCN Red List, which is really our global list of how we think species are endangered or and how much protection we think they need. And we classified it as critically endangered because we worked out that it only had a very small area of habitat left and that area of habitat was declining. So critically endangered is really that last most extreme level of threat before something goes extinct. We determined that it was a really rare rat that needed a lot of protection. But that wasn't the end of the story, because we found this rat in the logging area next to Zyra. Zyra was still working really hard to protect their forests, and there's always people wanting to log the Zyra forests. So we knew that we had to go and detect this species in the bush at Zyra, because we thought that if we could show this critically endangered animal live there, it would help give them some support to protect their forests. And we, like you, we settled back on the camera traps. We thought that was the best method, but we thought really long and hard about what we might have been doing wrong, because we'd been setting traps, working really hard, and hadn't gotten any evidence at all of this animal. And what we really zeroed in on was the bait. We thought perhaps what we're choosing as bait is not the best thing, and so we put a lot of thought into what might be a better bait to use to attract Vicar. And I'd like to see what you think. We've got a few options
okay, let's do
there about different baits, and I'd be really interested to know which one you think would be best.
Okay, amazing. So a poll's just come up, everyone, so make sure you put down what you think. So which bait would you choose to try and find evidence of a giant rat? So there's the coconut, which obviously they like to crack open, but is it a bait? Who knows? A standard Australian mammal bait, so that's peanut butter rolled oats. I mean, that sounds delicious. That sounds like a human bait as well. Sesame oil or gnarly nut oil. So that's
Gnarly
from
nuts, yep.
yeah, very good. Okay, so 1 of 4. Also, none of the above is not an answer, so you have to be decisive, everyone. Okay, I have to do this. Okay, great. All right, make sure you put your poll answers in, and we'll see what everyone thinks. Coming up soon. Peanut butter rolled oats, delicious. 1 for the rat, 1 for me.
Yeah, catches a lot of mammalogists as well, that bait.
All right, come up soon. Suspense, it's killing me. All right, very good. Thank you, poll person. Okay, so we did have a lot of people think it was coconut, 50%. 19% was the delicious peanut butter, 2% sesame, but 29% gnarly nut oil. So coconut is the winner. Is that correct?
Okay. Well, we went back in, camera traps, as I said. We focused in on those Delenia trees, the trees that people said was the favourite one for Vicar. And I have to mention here Kevin Sesse from Solomon Islands, who led a lot of this field work. He was getting up there and putting camera traps in the trees. We had been using coconut and rolled oats and peanut butter, but working in the rainforest, within a couple of days, both those baits just turned into a horrible mess.
Yeah.
They rotted away really quickly and became pretty ordinary baits. And I thought long and hard and decided that I'd try this new method where we got these little oil canisters that have a wick in there, and that we would fill those with some sort of oil, because I thought that the oil would soak up the wick and it would last for a long time in front of those camera traps and keep working as a bait to attract rats. And in the end, we settled on sesame oil. I don't know why we settled on that one, but that's what we ran with. And we had some amazing success.
Oh, there you go. The least
in the
popular
forest
answer.
at Zyra. We captured 96 images of Eurymys vicar over 10 cameras in a space of about 3 months. Wow. And we worked out that there was at least 4 different individuals that were coming in front of those cameras based on markings and whether they were male or female and those types of things. So we had our rat, we had great success, and it was a really fantastic result again. And since then we've gone out and we've published that news. We've shown the proof that this rodent occurs there, this critically endangered rat lives at Zyra, and we feel like it's given a lot of support for Zyra in their work to protect their forest. And for the moment, it seems at least that logging hasn't arrived at that area, so we have our fingers crossed that it will continue to be protected into the future. Thank you. That's the story
That's the story.
of how to catch a giant rat.
That is incredible. I cannot believe you've been looking for it for 5 years. What an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I can see so many questions already coming in, so everyone is really appreciative of your time. And the whole story, it's so fascinating. So everyone, please put all your questions in the chat. We'll try and get to as many as possible. We've got about 20 minutes, so I'll start to fire some questions at you, see how we go. I think I can see that a couple of questions came in halfway through, because I can see that, who was it? Was it Bryce? Or a few people were asking about the what was the bait in the trap, so I think we've already covered up on that one. But I think a couple of questions really come in as how did it feel to finally find it? Let's go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it was incredible.
That must have been amazing.
I almost didn't believe that we'd finally found it.
Yeah.
It was just, as I said, there has been some extinctions already in the Solomon, so I was beginning to get worried that Vicar might already be extinct and we may never find it. So just incredible feeling to finally know it was there, and really even better to show that I think that work has helped Zyra as well to protect their forests and given them some leverage to show that their forest is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. Must have been an amazing day. So a little bit more about the traps. So Devani, do any of these traps harm the rats? So in terms of how they work?
No, so these Elliott traps, they're really safe, and the cage traps as well, and the animals are trapped inside there okay. And in fact, with some species, what happens is we have a term we call them trap happy. So because the animals are in there and they get a really nice meal to eat, you'll get the same animals coming back again and again.
Yeah, is the fridge open?
Cases.
You need to go in the pantry again. Yeah, gotcha. Very good. Well, yes. Well, I guess that's part of the choice of using the traps to make sure they don't hurt the animals. Okay, what else do we have? So Ivan, would the smell from humans from setting up the cage scare the animals from getting close to the cage? I mean, would they even know?
Yep, they would know. I think in a lot of cases it probably does, for some species, does keep them away. That's one advantage of camera traps, I think, is that you can leave them out there for such a long period of time. Yeah. So over time, hopefully the scent of whatever bait you put there outlasts the scent of you setting those traps.
Yeah. Good. I'll go back to the bait as well, because I think this is one from a Year 8 student at Wellington Secondary, so great to have a school in today. They were asking about the bait, but they weren't sure what they eat. So, I mean, is there a difference between the bait that you use and the actual food that they eat, and also what do they generally eat?
Probably the best bait is what they eat. And if I had my time again, I would use gnarly nut oil. We tried to find that, but couldn't, or coconut oil. I didn't try that either. Yeah. We could give both of those a try, but we don't know a lot about what Vicar eats. There's, again, traditional knowledge, and gnarly nuts and coconuts are part of that, and it probably eats some fruit and things like that as well. But really, it's a process of trial and error, often just trying a few things and seeing what works and what doesn't, and adjusting your methods based on that. Yep,
processes of scientific work. Okay, so Alexa, and there's a few people that asked, and Bryce as well, I guess, just about the endangered status of the animal. So now that we know, what is being done, what can we do, I guess, to help save this animal?
Yeah, the biggest immediate step is just to help Zyra, really. That's a special community, as I said, that want to protect their forests. There are outside people that want to bring logging to there, so supporting them is number one on the list for sure. Other than that, we could try and find out if it exists on other islands as well. I don't think it does. We could try and find other patches of forest that might protect it. Yeah. And we could think about revegetating some areas that have already been logged and bring those back to being Vicar habitat. As far as we know, this animal doesn't live in log forests, so we'd have to think about how we could repair forests to be suitable for this animal. Yeah, fair enough.
Lalitha and others, I think a number of people have asked this, how does the rat crack the coconuts? It's very important.
That's the little photo that I showed at the illustration at the beginning, they chew through the husk at the top where the coconut joins onto the tree and get through the husk and then through the coconut. There's also bats that can do that in Solomon Islands. A lot of things are adapted to eat coconuts.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, very impressive part of the rat. Okay, so this is a good question from Holly. So how, you mentioned obviously almost starting off with the Indigenous knowledges before sort of going into like extending, I guess, your work. So how did you approach, the marrying the Indigenous knowledges and then with sort of the science that you do and doing that sensitively?
Yeah, it's a really fun part of my work, and I love learning about that existing knowledge. When we're talking about a new species and describing a species, it's a scientific hypothesis. So we say that we think Vika is a new species, and Indigenous people at Zyra, they have their own classifications for everything that lives there, and really those thoughts are as equal as my thoughts about what's a species, because that's their own hypotheses as well. So I really genuinely think that their knowledge is equivalent to anything that I bring. It's superior to what I bring. I bring that scientific classification aspect and some knowledge about how to find things, but yeah, their knowledge is fantastic. They've got that ecological knowledge that can fill in a lot of the blanks about Vika, what it eats and what it needs for us to protect it. And that's where those ideas on the fact that it only lives in primary forests come from as well. So we know from Indigenous knowledge that it's not found in the logged areas.
Yeah, yeah. I guess lots of extra information really there.
Yep.
So in terms of the process, this one's from Joe, thank you for your question. Did you have any false alarms over those 5 years where you thought you might have found it?
No false alarms, no. I've been searching for another rat on Malaita, a different island in Solomon Islands.
Yeah.
And we did have a false alarm there. Someone brought in a really big rat skull, but it was from Norvegicus, the brown rat that occurs in cities there. So we thought we had it. They heard this story about big rat skull that someone had found on the ground, and when I got it, it was unfortunately the wrong one.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we're still looking on Malaita for Quete, another rat.
Good. It's such an exciting area. Was this rat? This is just off the cuff question from me. Is this the first animal to have to be discovered by you?
For me, yep.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it was discovered either. Even a lot of people
found.
So had Vika already the name.
Yeah,
on it,
true. Yeah.
But yeah, first one that I've been able to name.
Try and locate it. One from Joe. So obviously a lot of scientific work needs to be funded. So how did that work in terms of continuing this work over 5 years, and who, I guess, supported this work over your journey?
Yeah, it was all through different little bits and pieces of funding. There was no one big grant. My PhD supervisor was able to fund a lot of my field work, and other small grants from groups like the Critical Ecosystems Partnership Fund and Australia Pacific Science Foundation, smaller funding groups that were willing to put in some money to help fund this research, and also general work at Zyra, in which we were able to piggyback efforts to find Vika as well.
Yeah, amazing. There's a few questions about how big the rat is. And I believe we've got something that's similar. Did you want to maybe bring in your demo? Are we allowed to bring in this one in? I don't know.
Yeah, we can bring it in. This is an Australian water rat, so it's...
Not the one, everyone.
No, not Vika, but an example of our Australian rats that's similar in size to Vika. This is one that you'll find in Melbourne, in the creeks and rivers around Melbourne. It's an aquatic species and about the same size as what Vika is. So it's a big rat. There are bigger species of rodents. This is a capybara skull that we have here as well, and that's one of the biggest rodents on Earth.
It's huge.
Big.
Yeah.
It's quite big.
Yeah, so this is similar to what it was. Yeah, very good. Okay, great. So thank you for your question. Do you have any pet rats? Good question, Holly.
No, I don't have any pet rats.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, I guess that leads on to another question of what inspires you to be in this area. So that clearly it's not that you have rats at home and want to find more.
No.
So what is it about this area that inspires you, and why did you choose to study in this area?
Yep, I wanted to I love learning new things myself, so that's a big part of it, is finding out things that people may not already know. That's a big driver. I also I've always loved nature, and so I really like working to help protect it, and a big part of protecting nature is knowing what's out there and describing the species and putting plans in place to stop things impacting them. And I also love linking with other people, communities like Zyra that are already doing amazing work, and I love the opportunity to support them. That's a really fun part of the work and really rewarding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a lot of international travel over the Solomon Islands must be incredible. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a question actually in terms of Solomon Islands. Like, did you see any other interesting species that you haven't really seen much?
A lot,
before?
yep. Like every day, something interesting. Hornbills, big birds, beautiful parrots. There's a lot of interesting mammals there as well for me. A group called monkey-faced bats, which are look a lot like these monkeys behind us. Short ears, really big animals. That's the one that I mentioned that can chew through coconuts as well.
Oh yeah.
Got really big, strong teeth for crunching hard materials in the forest. Probably fill the role of a monkey or a possum or something that we have in Australia or other continents in the environment.
Yeah, very cool. So in terms of your work in Solomon Islands, like how long would you go for at any one time? Like what did that work look like?
Yeah, I was often out there for a couple of months at a time, and we would hike into the forest, carry all our equipment with us because most people live along the coastline and there's not many roads that head into the forest where we want to go looking for these animals. So we have to carry all our equipment in, and we usually spend a couple of weeks in the one spot and camp there and get out there every night and every day setting our traps, and out there again the next day checking them over the course of a couple of weeks until we finally come out
Yeah, absolutely.
and need a rest.
You just decide it's done. I mean, one from Alexa, this is a great question. I mean, 5 years is obviously a really long time. Like what do you think were the main things that kept you motivated and continuing to search for that
That's a good question.
ultimate reward?
Yeah. Probably the knowledge that was out there about Vicar, that it was so solid that I just knew it had to be there.
Yeah.
And also I saw it as a really good way to help Zyra to prove that it was there, classify it as a critically endangered species. That was really good leverage to help them. So they were the two big motivators. I just ultimately we all wanted to succeed in finding this thing.
Yeah, just determination, pure
really
determination.
Determined team.
Yeah. So what about, you said, so in terms of working with the Indigenous people of the Solomon Islands, were there language barriers? I think you mentioned you did learn.
Yeah.
So how did that go about communicating?
So there's about 80 languages, Indigenous languages in the Solomons.
Yeah.
And that's usually people's first language. Then there's a pidgin, a Creole language that's based on English, that is kind of the common language that people speak to each other from different language groups. That's usually people's second language. And then the third one is English. English is the official language of Solomons, but it's third language for most people, so a lot of people are very shy to speak it. So we speak in pidgin when we're there, pidgin English, which is a fun language to learn.
And did you have a base, or did you always come back to the same sort of group, same area?
Always
around?
Often different places, all over the place, but Zyra's a place that I've been back to again and again over the years.
Must be a place very close to your heart now.
It is, definitely, got a lot of close friends there.
Now we have a little bit of an off-topic question. Someone wants to know, is there a porcupine behind you? And I know that this is actually a really interesting part of this museum. So sorry to go off topic just slightly, but we're going to keep on animals. Do you know much about this being that is a porcupine, obviously?
It is a porcupine. So we were founded in 1887, and most of the specimens came here from that time up till the Second World War. Walter Baldwin Spencer, who helped establish the museum, used his contacts from all around the world, and people sent stuff from all over the place to contribute to this collection. And that's a porcupine. We've got a range of other taxidermied specimens here and lots of other things behind us as well, in front of us over here.
Very good. Keen eye. Very good, whoever pointed that out. I don't think I've got a name down here, but that's awesome. Okay, so we've just got a couple of minutes left. I'd love to, I don't know whether that question came from a student, a keen-eyed student, but I know there's a lot of high school students that do zoom in to these sort of events. So yeah, I'd be keen to know your thoughts on students that are currently studying sort of, biological sciences, and any advice that you might have for those students thinking about pursuing this, and whether they can, whether they should, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, sure. I was lucky. I think I was someone that from a very early age was obsessed with nature and knew that I wanted to do biology. I don't think that's normally the case. I think I was lucky in that way. So I just worked really hard to stay working as a biologist, and it is a good career if there's other people who are interested in this type of work. There's a lot of different tangents you can take in biology, working in laboratories, doing work out in the field like I love to do, working with data, and really it's a lot of kind of working out puzzles and using information and data to try and work out the answers to big questions that you're thinking about. So that part of it's really fun.
Yeah. You love your job?
I do, yep. Love it.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So I guess, we've got sort of 3 or 4 minutes left. So any other questions, keep coming in, but a couple of other ones. In terms of the process, we didn't get too much of it in terms of the classification, making it official. So do you want to talk a little bit through what's the next steps after that?
Definitely. Usually we use a few different lines of evidence when we want to classify a species, and we take a specimen of the animal, and we often use museums like this where they have collections of things from different parts of the world, and we zero in on a few different things. One of the big ones now is DNA, so we sequence the DNA from the animals and we compare across different species. So in the case of Vicar, I sequenced DNA and I compared that to other species from New Guinea and Australia and Solomon Islands. We also look at the morphology of the animal, what it looks like. That includes external morphology, so what its fur colour is, how big its ears are. We take measurements of the head and body and tail length and hind foot length and all these other things. And then another big one is that we look at the skulls. This is a big one for mammals. We look at the shape of the skull and also the shape of the teeth. And we take lots of measurements, and then we use some statistics to work out whether the skulls are the same shape or whether they're different. We put all that together, and we have to officially say this is a new species and this is the name that we give it, and that's the permanent record of that animal. And we designate what we call a holotype. So we say this skull here is the holotype for Eurymys vicar, and then anyone else that finds another rat in the future, they come and look at that holotype and they compare their rat to the holotype and
What do you mean
work
holotype?
out. It's just a specimen that we say this is this is what vicar looks like. It's the prime example.
Right. Yeah. Great.
Yep.
Great. And I guess my final question is, and you did touch on a little bit about other things you're doing, but what are you currently working on, and I guess what's next in your field of view?
Got some. There's some other species that we know exist. Same stories.
How many years into those ones?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got enough in me to put in the same. Well, we have put in the same effort, I guess.
Yeah.
And haven't found it yet. That one I mentioned, Quete. We're working with Baru Conservation Alliance on Malaita Island. They're a similar group of people that really want to protect their forests, and they've got one there that they have really detailed knowledge about called Quete. So we're working hard to find that one. Still haven't quite got there yet, but I think we'll get there one day.
Yeah.
Also doing some general work on evolution of mammals, looking at DNA and bats and other various things, possums across Solomon Islands and in Australia, and working out what are the processes that lead to new species being evolving, and also what we can do to protect them, what's their best habitats and ways we can save them.
So exciting. Well, that's great. Well, look, who knows? Maybe next year, Masterclass, we'll be telling the new story.
Yes, the story of Quete. How to catch
Who knows?
Quete.
Well, that's, about 2:45. We've just got to the time. So Thank you so much. That was fascinating. So many questions came in. So clearly everyone was super interested and intrigued by the whole thing. So thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
It's clearly very impactful. So thank you to everyone for joining us online. This is a fantastic event. But there are still a couple more mid-afternoon masterclasses coming up for the rest of the week. Tomorrow at 2 p.m, we are live at the Bureau of Meteorology, which I'm very excited about. So join us. Dr. Lyndon Ashcroft will be joining us. The event is Hunting Weather History to Prepare for the Future. So this is a rare opportunity to explore archival weather books dating back hundreds of years and unique weather instruments that help us to understand our weather systems. Very exciting. We've also got the Collaborate to Innovate Expo, which will also be taking place at Science Gallery tomorrow. All the details are on the website, the Science Festival website at the University of Melbourne. So there's links in the chat if you'd like to book in for those things, and all the details, as I said, are on the Science Festival website. And other than that, we're done for the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and see you tomorrow, everyone. See you later.